My name is Asher Lev. Chapter 4. I drew him dead in his coffin, surrounded by flowers. I drew his closed, heavy-lidded eyes, his thick, straight hair, his walrus mustache. I drew it all from memory into that Hebrew notebook, and later that day I drew him again from memory into my English notebook. In the days that followed, I drew him over and over and over again. I drew him empty and hollow. I drew him swollen and bloated. I distorted his face and twisted his eyes. Over and over and over again, I drew him disfigured, ghoulish, a horror of a face, in front of that mountain of flowers. My father went into my room one night, that week, and found my desk strewn with drawings. There were drawings on the dresser and on the floor. I saw him peering at the drawings on the desk when I came in from the bathroom. "What is all this?" he asked. "Drawings." "Don't be disrespectful to me, Asher. I see their drawings. You can't study Chumash, but this you have time for." "Aryeh," my mother called softly. She was standing in the doorway. "I'm talking to our son, who is an artist again." "Aryeh," my mother said again. The two of them went from the room. I sat at my desk in my pajamas. I used one of the charcoal sticks I had bought from Udall Krinsky earlier that day. Drawing on a sheet of heavy paper in one continuous line, I did the contour of Stalin's face, then his eyes and nose and mustache. Slowly, I shaded the area around his eyes and along the side of his head. I had never used charcoal before. I watched the dead face take on depth. I darkened the area directly beneath the cheekbones and in the ears. I ignored the thick, straight hair and the mustache, except for a few quick lines. Now he was a man on the paper, with volume and depth, and he was dead. Then I erased the closed, heavy-lidded eyes and redrew them open and staring, eyes wide and dead, staring out onto the world. I moved back my chair and saw my mother standing behind me. She was looking at the charcoal drawing of Stalin. "It's a good drawing, Asher," she said softly. "It isn't pretty." "No," she said. I got into bed. "Your father was worried about your studies, Asher." I did not say anything. "Asher, you can't ignore your studies." "I study, Mama." "Yes, we see how you study." "Can I draw you one day, Mama?" Udall Krinsky said he would let me draw him. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow, Mama?" "No, not tomorrow." "This week?" "Not this week. I have tests this week." "Next week, then." "All right, Asher, next week, but not Monday. Monday we are going downtown to be photographed for passports and to fill out papers." "What are passports?" She told me. "I'm not going," I said. "You'll need to be photographed, Asher." "I'm not going to Vienna, Mama." "Asher, please don't be a child." "Oh no," I said. "Oh no, I'm not going to Vienna. I'll stay with Uncle Yitzchak." "Asher." "Good night, Mama," I said. "Don't you want me to hear your Kriya Shema?" "I'll say it to myself," I said. I asked Udall Krinsky the next day, "Do you know what a passport is?" He was posing for me between customers. He kept his head straight, but I saw his eyes move in my direction. "Yes," he said. "I know what a passport is. My mama and papa want me to get a passport. Without a passport, you will not be able to go to Vienna." "I'm not going to Vienna." "Asher, your father will do important things in Vienna." I did not answer. I was working on his wide, sad, bulging eyes. "The Torah says, 'Honor your father and mother,'" Udall Krinsky said. "I know, I can read the Torah." "Asher," he was hurt. I held up the drawing. He shook his head in amazement. "Such a gift," he murmured. "Your Uncle Yitzchak told me once about this. But I listened the way one always listens to a bragging uncle. But this is a gift, Asher." "How do I keep the charcoal from rubbing off?" "Ah," he said, "you use this." He went to a shelf near the display case of drawing material and came back with a spray can. "You can spray it on so. Stand away from the drawing so the spray does not get in your eyes." He pushed the top button and moved the can quickly back and forth across the drawing. The spray was pungent. "Do not breathe it, Asher. Move away." He released the button and looked down at the drawing. He looked at it a long time. "It is a good drawing," he said softly. "The son of Reb Aryeh Lev has a great gift." "Keep it," I said. He looked at me. "Please keep it," I said. He blinked. "I thank you." He looked down again at the drawing. Later, I went into my Uncle Yitzchak's jewelry and watch repair store. It was brightly lighted with ceiling fluorescence. The showcases glistened and gleamed. It was a large store, and I did not like to go into it because its brightness was cold, like sunlight on distant ice. My uncle was behind the center showcase. He wore a dark suit and was smoking a cigar. There were 2 customers in the store being waited on by a young man behind the left row of showcases. To the right of the door was a watchmaker's workbench. A small man with a gray beard sat at the workbench, peering at the watch through an eyepiece. My uncle, the young man, and the watchmaker all wore small, dark skull caps. "My nephew, the artist," Uncle Yitzchak said, his moist lips smiling around his cigar. "You want to sell me a picture? Can I stay with you when Mama and Papa go to Vienna?" He stopped smiling and took the cigar out of his mouth. His round, fleshy face looked startled. "What are you talking about, Asher?" "I don't want to go to Vienna." "I know you don't want to go to Vienna. The whole world knows you don't want to go to Vienna." "I won't go. Can I stay with you?" He peered at me in disbelief. He seemed to want to say something, but did not know what words to use. "I told my mama you would let me stay with you. You told..." His voice became husky. He cleared his throat noisily. The customers glanced over at him. "Let me think about it," he said. "A thing like this you can't decide on one foot. I'll need to think about it, Asher." "Uncle Yitzchak, I'll have no place to stay if I can't stay with you. I don't want to go to Boston and stay with Aunt Leah. I want to stay here where I know people." "Let me think about it, Asher." I came out of the store into the March night. As I went past the large glittering window of the store, I looked inside and saw my uncle hurriedly dialing the telephone on the counter. "Asher, why did you talk to your Uncle Yitzchak about living with him?" my father asked me that night. "I need a place to stay, Papa." "Asher, will you stop this foolishness?" "It isn't foolishness." "Stop it," my father said. "It isn't foolishness." "Rabono Shel Olam," my father said. "What are you doing?" "It's time for you to go to bed, Asher," my mother said softly. "Shall I come with you?" "Yes, Mama." She sat looking at the drawings on the desk as I prepared for bed. "Did you buy the charcoal from Reb Krinsky?" she asked. "Yes." When I lay in the bed, she came over and said to me, "Asher, you're hurting your father." I did not say anything. "You shouldn't hurt your father in this way." "I don't care." "Asher, please, you must not talk like that." "I don't want to lose it again," I said. "What?" She stared at me. "I don't want to lose it again, Mama. I don't care about anyone." She was silent for a long time. Then she went from the room without saying good night. That Monday, I would not go with my parents to the passport office. They decided to go another time. It was early, my mother said. There was plenty of time for passports. It was better for me to not miss a day of school, she said. I went to school. The next day, my father flew to Washington. On Wednesday night, my mother sat near the window of the living room, and I sat a few feet away from her on an easy chair, drawing her face with pastels. "I should be studying for a history test," my mother said. "Please don't move your head, Mama." "How do you feel when you draw, Asher? Is it a good feeling?" I was quiet. I've often wondered. It must be a good feeling. I drew her eyes, the clear brown eyes, and her small lips and straight nose, and the delicately boned curves of her cheeks. She seemed small and delicate to me, a fledgling one holds in a hand. Her skin was fair and smooth, and smelled of warm perfume and night flowers. I shaded her face delicately with the warm earth browns, and put only the vaguest of cold viridian on her white neck. I thought I heard her say, "Why do you draw, Asher?" I did not reply. "What does it mean to you, my Asher?" I thought I heard her say. "Because it may hurt us." Gently, I rubbed an earth red into the shadow beneath the delicate curve of her jaw. "Asher," I thought I heard her say. "Asher." "I'm sorry, Mama. What did you ask?" "It wasn't important," she said after a moment. I held up the drawing. She looked at it for a very long time. Then she said, "What are we going to do, Asher?" I was quiet. "Rabboni Shel Olam, what are we going to do?" "I have to put fixative on your picture, Mama." I could feel her staring at me as I went out of the room. My father returned from Washington late Thursday night and left for his office early Friday morning. I did not see him until that afternoon, when he came back from his office to prepare for Shabbos. I was in my room when he came home. A few minutes later, I heard him in the kitchen talking to my mother. Then suddenly his voice was loud. He spoke in Yiddish. In recent weeks, he had begun speaking Yiddish as frequently as English. I could not make out what he said. I heard my mother say in English, "Aryeh, the boy." Then their voices lowered. A moment later, I heard them go into their bedroom. We sat at the Shabbos table that night and ate and sang Zimros. My father said very little. When he sang, he held his head in his hands and swayed slowly back and forth. My mother and I sang with him. That was the night I began to realize that something was happening to my eyes. I looked at my father and saw lines and planes I had never seen before. I could feel with my eyes. I could feel my eyes moving across the lines around his eyes and into and over the deep furrows on his forehead. He was 35 years old, and there were lines on his face and forehead. I could feel the lines with my eyes and feel, too, the long, straight, flat bridge of his nose and the clear darkness of his eyes and the strong, thick curves of the red eyebrows and the thick red hair of his beard graying a little. I saw the stray gray strands and the tangle of hair below his lips. I could feel lines and points and planes. I could feel texture and color. I saw the Shabbos candles on the table glowing golden red. I saw my mother small and warm and silken in a lovely Shabbos dress of pale blue and white. I saw my hands white and bony, my fingers long and thin, my face in the mirror above the buffet, pale, with black eyes and wild red hair. I felt myself flooded with shapes and textures of the world around me. I closed my eyes, but I could still see that way inside my head. I was seeing with another pair of eyes that had suddenly become awake. I sat still in my chair and felt frightened. I opened my eyes. My parents were looking at me. "Are you all right, Asher?" my mother asked. "Yes." Do you have fever?" She put her hand on my head. I saw her fingers over the top of my eyes. "No," she said, and withdrew her hand. My father went on singing. I heard him as if from a distance, but I could see him sharply, the tiny folds of skin in the outer corners of his eyes, the strong flare of his nostrils, the lines of his lips beneath the untrimmed beard. Then I saw him open his eyes. He may have felt my eyes on him. He opened his eyes and gazed directly into my eyes. His eyes, clear and dark, locked with mine, and for a long moment I felt his strength and sensed the pools from which it nourished. And I looked down at the table. Then I heard him say quietly, "You made a beautiful drawing of your mother, Asher." He spoke in Yiddish. "A beautiful drawing." He closed his eyes and hummed a slow, loud-over melody he had sung to me often years ago, in the time before my mother had become ill. Then he opened his eyes again. "Asher, you have a gift. I do not know if it is a gift from the Rabboni Shel Olam or from the other side. If it is from the other side, then it is foolishness, dangerous foolishness, for it will take you away from Torah and from your people, and lead you to think only of yourself. I want to tell you something. Listen to me, my Asher. About 25 years ago, all the yeshivos in Russia were closed by communists. and the students were scattered in different places in small groups. The only groups who continued to fight against the destruction of Torah by the enemies of Torah were the Ladover and Breslover Hasidim. The Reb's father, may he rest in peace, fought to establish yeshivos, went to jail, and almost lost his life before he finally got out of Russia and came to America. Are you listening to me, Asher? During the 10 years before the Second World War, Ladover Hasidism ran illegal yeshivos in Russia and helped keep Torah alive. They were small yeshivos, 10 students here, 20 students there, 40 students somewhere else. Torah remained alive. Your mother recently found an old copy of Stern in the library here in New York. Stern was a newspaper published in the Ukraine by Jewish communists who hated the Master of the Universe and his Torah. These Jewish communists wrote that they had completely destroyed Yiddishkeit in Russia. The only ones standing in the way of their final goal were Ladover and Breslover Hasidim. The communists themselves wrote this, Asher. It's true, my mother murmured. It's true. Now listen to me, Asher. I know you are only a boy, but perhaps you will be able to understand anyway. Someone once asked how it is possible to establish a connection between man and the Master of the Universe. The answer was that man must take the first step. In order for there to be a connection between man and the Master of the Universe, there must first be an opening, a passageway, even a passageway as small as the eye of a needle. But man must make the opening by himself. Man must take the beginning step. Then the Master of the Universe will move in, as it were, and widen the passageway. Asher, we have to make passageways to our own people in Russia. We have a responsibility to them. We must make passageways for them to move into. They cannot make the opening on their side, so we must make it on our side. Do you understand me, Asher? I nodded slowly. Jews in Europe are starving for Torah. The Rebbe is sending me to Europe to build centers for Torah. Our people in Russia are starving for words from the outside. The Rebbe is sending me to Europe to make passageways for them. This is more important than anything else. These are Jewish lives, Asher. Nothing is more important in the eyes of the Master of the Universe than a Jewish life. Do you understand me? I was quiet. I saw his dark eyes and the strong dream that filled them, and I was quiet. Asher, my father said. I think Asher understands, my mother said quietly. Let Asher say if he understands. Yes, Papa. He was silent a moment, nodding his head. Then he said, Finish your tea, Asher, and we sing more Zimmeros. I said to my mother later, as she sat on the edge of my bed, I'm also a Jewish wife, Mama. I'm also precious in the eyes of the Ribbono Shel Olam. Her thin hands fluttered over a button on the front of her dress. Yes, she said faintly. Does someone have a responsibility to me? She seemed not to know what to say. Mama, taking you to Vienna is not your responsibility, Asher. I don't want to go. I'm afraid to go. Something inside me says I shouldn't go. Now you're being a child. It says I shouldn't go, Mama. Asher, please. Can I stay with Aunt Leah in Boston? No, I can't stay in Boston. I have to stay here. I have to stay here on my street, Mama. Why doesn't anyone listen to me? She put her hand gently against my face. I saw the white skin and bony ridges and the rise of the veins. Her fingers were cool. Her dress rustled softly as she moved. Everyone is listening, she said. There would be no problem if no one were listening to you, Asher. My uncle Yitzchak and his family joined us for the first Seder of the Passover festival. It was a long, respectful Seder with much singing and words of Torah and telling of stories about the Rebbe and his father. My father sat on large cushions on his chair. He wore a white cotton robe. With his strong body and long red beard and dark eyes, he dominated the room. I do not remember how it happened, but sometime during the Seder meal, my uncle and I were together in my room, and he was looking at some of my drawings. Yes, he said, you can draw. Millions of people can draw. I looked away from him, my face hot. Your father doesn't know what to do with you, Asher. Can I stay with you? I can work for you in the store. Is there anything else I can do in the store? Asher, listen to me. I wish I could tell you this without hurting you. You're behaving like a child. Everyone is saying that you're behaving like a child. I can do errands for you, Uncle Yitzchak. It won't cost you much. I'll just need some money for charcoal and paper and things. Where do you get your money now, Asher? I save up the candy money Mama gives me. For God's sake, Asher, grow up. You're driving your father crazy. Can't I stay with you? No, you can't stay with me. Do you think my brother will let you stay with me while he and your mother go off to Europe? What's the matter with you, Asher? You sound like you can't use your head anymore. I may have to stay with Aunt Leah after all, I thought. But I can't leave my street. Let's go back to the center, my Uncle Yitzchak said. As we started from the room, he said to me, Listen, I won't lie to you, Asher. It doesn't change my mind, but I won't lie to you. Millions of people can draw, but I don't think too many of them draw like you. We had no school during the Passover festival. On the first of the intermediate days of the festival, I walked over to Yudel Quincy's store and found him behind the counter, eating a hard-boiled egg and chewing a matzo. He greeted me soberly. Hello, Asher. Everyone is talking about you. Were the Ladover and Breslover Hasidim the only groups in Russia who fought for Torah against the Jewish communists? He seemed startled. Ah, he said, chewing hard and swallowing. He was having trouble getting the matzo down. He coughed, his eyes watered. He took a deep breath and wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his white smock. At least say hello first, Asher. A man cannot eat hard-boiled eggs and matzos and answer serious questions all at the same time. He chewed and swallowed again. Now, Asher, what did you ask me? I asked it again. What is this all of a sudden? Who told you about Jewish communists? My father. Ah, he said, I understand. He put the remnants of the hard-boiled egg and matzo on the paper he had spread on top of the counter and wiped his hands with a handkerchief. He glanced around. It was early afternoon. We were alone. A bright April sun shone outside. I do not know if they were the only ones, he said, but they fought, and not only against Jewish communists, but against Goyish communists also. Sometimes the Jewish communists were worse than Goyim. Ask your mother about the Jewish communists, Asher. She is studying about Russia. Yes, we and the Breslover fought, and they hated us for it, and still hate us, those of them Stalin left alive. The secret police would find out about Ladover and Breslover Jews, and they would come to arrest them on Friday night when they were sure the Jews would be home with their families. In Siberia, I met a Breslover Hasid who told me that 29 Breslover Hasidim were arrested in the city of Uman in 1938. They were accused of attempting to organize an underground Trotsky organization with the checks they were receiving from friends in America. You are young, Asher. You cannot begin to understand the stupidity of such an accusation. Breslover Hasidism organizing a Trotsky underground. They were beaten and tortured. One of them was beaten in front of the others in order to force the others to confess to the accusation. They also suffered from hunger because they would not dirty themselves eating the food they were given. 3 of them died in the prison in Uman. The rest were sent to Siberia. I discovered after the war that only 3 survived. The Breslover who told me this was taken from my camp a few weeks later, and I never saw him again. I don't know if he is one of the 3, Asher. They hated us, and were afraid of us, and arrested and killed us whenever they could. He glanced around quickly. He took a deep breath. He started gloomily at the matzo on the counter. I remember when I first met you, I was in a grocery store with matzos over my head. In Russia, to obtain matzos, we had to turn over the world. People went to prison because of matzos. Ah, it is a strange world, Asher. Sometimes I think the master of the universe has another world to take care of, and he neglects this world. God forbid. Would you like a piece of matzo, Asher? I did not want any matzo. I came out of the store onto the street. It was a warm day, one of the first warm days after the long winter. I walked slowly around Brooklyn Parkway beneath the trees. Old women sat on the benches along the islands of the parkway, sunning themselves and gossiping. Soon Passover would be over. Soon I would not have Udo Krinsky to talk to. Soon the street would be gone. There was a feeling of summer coming, of decisions being made, of haste and departure, of light and shade, of brightness and darkness. I saw the sun glinting off the back metal of a fire plug. I saw a gaunt, skeletal-faced old lady laughing happily on a bench. I saw a little boy in a skullcap and side curls, walking along the parkway, dragging his metal-braced right leg in a heavy, flat-footed limp. I saw a little girl of about 3 walking with a boy of about 7. They were talking and laughing, and holding their hands together and swinging their arms. The boy wore a skullcap and side curls. Ritual fringes protruded from beneath his shirt and flapped gaily in the air as he walked. They looked to be brother and sister. How many times had I seen a brother and sister walking like that along Brooklyn Parkway? How many times? Something was happening to my eyes and my head, and I did not know how to think or feel about it. Mrs. Rackover said to me when I came into the apartment, "Where were you?" "You were more than an hour late for lunch." "I was walking." "You were walking." "You were driving me crazy. Go wash your hands, and I will give you something to eat." "Where is my mother?" "Your mother went to the library. Go wash your hands, Asher. I cannot spend half the day giving you lunch." They were very beautiful," I said. "Why didn't I see it before?" "What?" Mrs. Rackover said. "I wonder if they have a mother and father," I said. "What is the matter with you, Asher? Are you sick? Do you have a fever?" "No." "Go wash your hands. You were driving us all crazy with your pictures and your stubbornness. What kind of Jewish boy behaves this way to a mother and father? You ought to be ashamed of yourself." Why didn't I ever see it before? I asked myself. Something had happened to my eyes and my head. I looked at my eyes and head in the mirror over the bathroom sink. They looked the same as always, eyes dark and hair red and wild. But something had happened inside them, and I did not think I was frightened now. I spent the afternoon drawing pictures of the brother and sister I had seen walking together on Brooklyn Parkway. I remembered their thin faces, and I drew them walking along the parkway. Then I drew them crossing a country road, walking beneath tall trees, chasing a butterfly. I drew them reading together and talking together. I drew them crossing a street together. I drew them laughing together. The desk and the dresser and the bed were strewn with drawings. Later in the afternoon, I went downstairs and walked along the parkway, but I could not find any girl and boy together who looked to be brother and sister. I was in my room when my mother returned from the library, her arms laden with books. She put the books on the wall table in the hallway and removed her coat. I called her into my room. "Look," I said. I pointed to the drawings. "Not now, Asher." "Mama, please." She seemed so impatient and glanced quickly through a few of the drawings. Then she sat down on the bed and went through them all slowly. She looked a long time at the drawings of the brother and sister reading together and talking together. She put the drawings down. Her eyes were wide and moist. She went from my room without a word. I heard the door to her bedroom close softly. I waited a while, then went out to the hallway and looked at the books she had left on the table. They were all in Russia. One of them was a grammar of the Russian language. My father said to me at the Shabbos table the next night, "You look so unhappy these days, Asher." "I'm sorry, Papa." "It bothers you that I am away so much?" "Yes, Papa. It bothered me too when my father, may he rest in peace, was away. But I do not know how else the work can be done. To touch a person's heart, you must see a person's face. One cannot reach a soul through a telephone. He stroked his red beard slowly. Then he said in a soft sing-song voice, the early Tzaddikim, the ones who were the first disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, also used to travel. Some took it upon themselves to go into exile in order to atone for the sins of Israel and to hasten their redemption. Others wandered about, looking for kidnapped Jewish children they could ransom. Others traveled to the end of the earth looking for a teacher whose soul was like their soul and with whom they could study Torah. And others journeyed from place to place, teaching the words of the Baal Shem Tov and changing people's hearts and souls to Hasidus. My father, Olav Hasholem, after whom you are named, was a great scholar. That you know, Asher. An emissary from the Reb's father stayed with my father for a while. They studied together. A year later, my father moved his family to Ladov and became an emissary of the Reb's father. The night he was killed, they had been making plans together. My father was to travel to the Ukraine to start underground yeshivos. Their heads were full of plans for Torah. They forgot it was the night before Easter. The drunken peasant remembered. He paused. His eyes glittered in the light of the Shabbos candles. Then he continued in that same sing-song voice. When the Reb's father was able to come to America, he brought me and your Uncle Yitzchak and our mother, may she rest in peace, with him. I was 14 then. I remember that journey. He paused again and hummed a brief passage from one of the Zimmeros. Yes, he murmured. The Reb's father felt something had been left unfinished in the world. Plans had been made and had been left unfinished. A life had been lost because of those plans, and the plans had been left unfulfilled. He hummed another verse from the Zimmeros. Then he stopped and closed his eyes. Then he said, his eyes still closed, sing Zimmeros with me, Asher. You too, Rivke, sing Zimmeros with me. Later that night, as I got into bed, my mother asked me, did you understand what your father said to you, Asher? Yes. Do you understand what it means to leave a great work incomplete? I think so, Mama. It's important that you understand that, Asher. Why are you studying Russian history, Mama? To help your father in his work. Was your brother supposed to go to Europe and do what Papa will be doing? No, your Uncle Yakov, her lips trembled, was going to teach Russian history in New York University. He was also going to be an advisor in the government. The American government? Yes, Asher. Will you be an advisor in the American government, Mama? No, she said. I will not be an advisor in the American government. I will graduate from college in June and go with you and your father to Vienna in October. Are you ready to say your Kriya Shema, Asher? I said the Kriya Shema. A while later, I sensed them through dim and restless sleep, standing by my bed, whispering. I felt a hand straighten my blanket. Then I felt fingers move across my face and forehead in a caress, my father's fingers. Then I felt nothing, but I knew they were standing there in silence. Then they went from the room. I saw my mythic ancestor again that night, moving in huge strides across the face of the earth, stepping over snow-filled mountains, spanning wide and fertile valleys, journeying, endlessly journeying. I saw him traverse warm villages and regions of ice and snow. I saw him peer into the windows of secret yeshivos and into the barracks of Siberian camps. It's colder inside than outside, I thought I heard him say. And what are you doing with your time, my Asher love? I thought I heard him say. He said it thunderously, and I woke and lay in the darkness. Then I got out of bed and went to my desk and turned on the light. I looked at the drawings of the brother and sister. They seemed a scrawl, an absurd and childish movement of the hand, a small-minded frivolity. They were prisoners of stone and wastelands of snow and night. What was a drawing in the face of the darkness of the other side? What was a pen and paper? What were pastels in the face of the evil of the shell? I felt myself suddenly entombed, and I snapped off the light and got back into bed. Even in the dark, I could see the different kinds of blackness in the room, and the way the slit of pale light between the bottom of the window shade and the window still played on the wall near my desk and glinted off the drawings. What do you want from me? I thought. I'm only a 10-year-old boy. 10-year-old boys play in the streets. 10-year-old boys chase back and forth through the hallways of apartment houses. 10-year-old boys ride up and down elevators for afternoon entertainment. 10-year-old boys run after cars along New York Avenue. If you don't want me to use the gift, why did you give it to me? Or did it come to me from the other side? It was horrifying to think my gift may have been given to me by the source of evil and ugliness. How can evil and ugliness make a gift of beauty? I lay in my bed and thought a long time about what was wanted from me. Then I was tired and began to drift off to sleep. I thought I would see my mythic ancestor again, and I fought to stay awake, but I felt myself moving off. It was only then that I realized I had violated the shabbos by turning on the light to look at my drawings, and by turning it off again. Then it was a while before I was able to sleep. During the Passover, the new Soviet government announced that the doctors arrested under the Stalin regime had been released. The announcement said that the accusations had all been lies. My father was informed by telephone that 2 of the Jewish doctors had been beaten to death by the police while in prison. The announcement said that 15 doctors had been released. I remembered having heard that 9 had been arrested. I did not ask about the difference in numbers. I was tired, very tired. On the Thursday after Passover, I went with my parents for our passports.